Hey there, it's Quinn with PTSD While Black. Um, doing a little check in after therapy, talking about um, my suicide attempts as a teenager and um, recognizing that my teenage self, okay, as my 39-year-old self, is trying to forgive my teenage self for attempted murder. Um, and being able to talk with my therapist today, she's like, well, it's another narrative of that is attempted rescue from not belonging, attempted rescue from whatever the pain was that I thought I was experiencing at the time. And to get to that place of forgiveness, of recognizing that 15, 16, and 17-year-old Quinn were using whatever resources that she had available at the time. Um, and that knowledge, though though that was my best resource at the time, owning at the same time the harm was done, that I've harmed myself. The reason the subject came up is because I've noticed when I had to go to sleep early for had to be up at 5:30 in the morning. Anytime I have to go to sleep and be up early in the morning, I can't sleep at all. And this has been since the trauma, especially since the concussion. It's been way worse. Um, so knowing that I just cannot sleep, and I started talking to my therapist about, is this part of compounded trauma with things that I've experienced when I would attempt to sleep. And I went back to as far as I can recall of what I can think of things happening to me when I slept. 15 years old, putting a belt around my neck and tying it to a bedpost, hoping that I would die in the middle of the night. So owning that that was the logic that my 15-year-old self had, but not the willingness to carry out actually attempting suicide. So therefore, there's this trauma of going to sleep at night that I've created, and that I would like to own the feelings around it, to release it, to feel what was present then and there, and how do I feel about it today, um, to set myself free, to be accountable to me. Um, and then the discussion in therapy talked about also how, oh, I wrote it down. My allowing myself to make mistakes, and um, that I beat myself up for making mistakes. That was a mistake. 15 years old, that was a mistake. So no need to beat her up, no need to lock her up. Um, and that I want the hurt to stop, but that I will hide and rationalize blaming myself with the subject of making me accountable for the things that I've done. Um, and so I shift discussions to blaming me for what was wrong in the situation versus having compassion and empathy for me with what was going on with me during the situation. And I do this in my marriage. I do this on the job. I do this in any volunteer work that I'm doing. Um, and especially with work, it's I'm to blame. I've got to make myself accountable for making sure that the client has the best experience possible. Um, and I'm accountable for making sure my marriage is the best marriage possible. And I'm caretaking other people, but not caretaking Quinn. I'm not showing up for Quinn. And I have trauma around not showing up for Quinn. And I love that my therapist said that I ration out empathy to myself, that I ration it, I micromanage empathy as to how much empathy I'm allowed to have and how much compassion I'm allowed to have for myself. Um, and so that's a good challenge that I'm being presented with right now. It's what would it be like to have endless empathy and compassion for myself, like a narcissist would fucking do, you know? um, what would that look like? That compassion is something that's natural and okay to have for myself. Ooh, feels terrifying. Um, and I realize my trauma that I've survived has taught me to not have compassion, to just be a survivor versus having needs and having a desire for connection. And in reality, what's happening with whether I'm compulsively shopping, compulsively overeating, or tolerating chronic pain, or in codependent relationships, it's all because I'm trying to get back that connection. I'm trying to obtain connection when in reality, I need connection with me. I need compassion for me. And that it's okay to have compassion for me. Like, what the fuck? Yeah, so woo, that's an entirely new concept, idea, thought process for me. Um, and what would it be like to have compassion for Quinn? Because I blame myself for the rape. I blame myself for the fire in our apartment complex, even though it was started in somebody else's garage. I blame myself because I went to sleep. Because I went to sleep. I blame myself for the trauma I've experienced in relationships. I do a lot of self blaming around even the car accident. If I hadn't have been so angry and bitter with my husband, um, and we would not have needed to go to a couples counseling meeting that day, that we would not have been in a car accident. So it's like all these little pieces that I blame myself, and I blame myself for um, not being strong enough to get out of chronic pain, and I blame myself for being super heavy and not realizing that there's this connection between my trauma and my compulsive eating. Um, and so I'm really having to see all these areas. That's a lot of shit. That's a lot of shit to make myself responsible for. And some of it, if you think of the serenity prayer, grant me the strength to accept the things I cannot change and the courage to change the things I can and the wisdom to know the difference. I keep going with the courage to change the things I can, but not the serenity to accept the things that I could not change and that are not part of my responsibility for everyone and everything. And even if I am responsible, there's also the wisdom of knowing that there is compassion. I can be responsible for something and have compassion for myself. That both can fucking exist at the same time. So yeah, just talking through my therapy session. All right. Till next time, friends. Peace.